you said about your father and how he played at the highest level in Australia. What is the football scene like in Australia? Is it the biggest sport? Is, rugby or other sports more popular? What kind of is the popularity and the culture around football in Australia?
I mean, straight to canceling me. I love it. All right. It's not amazing. It's especially for younger players. As you get older, like senior football, the game's played very fast, few touches, right? And that's most senior environments around the world. So senior football is decent, but if you look down through the ranks, like under from say maybe under 13s to under 18s, does get lost as far as development goes for that age range because and again, I talked about this on another podcast. It's not anyone's fault. It's not like it's one coach's fault, 10 coaches' fault, or the player's fault. It's actually a combination of everyone, right?
Hmm.
And I talked about this on this other podcast. Like in Spain, you've got kids that are playing on the street for so many hours a day, which means when they get to their training and etc., they've had 10 times the touches on the ball than anyone in an Australian team that's going to training, right? So they're going to be more polished. They're going to make better decisions. They're going to have played more. They're going to be more confident. And so what happens is when you throw players that play on the street every day and play for hours and hours and hours into a team environment that's a bit maybe easier than playing on the street, they flourish and they develop and they play better, right? And so with better players, you need better coaches, or the coaches develop because you've got better players, and the coaches have to figure out, better tech. Because at the end of the day, it gets to a point in football, and you guys might know this, that dribbling, right, using your pace, etc., doesn't get you any further, right? Because the defenders are too good. The positional player, the other team is too good. The formation, that you can't just go out there and do what you want, right? Unless you Neymar, Messi, Ronaldo. So you have to, with coaching, it becomes a sense of you have to learn how to be a master, like with tactics, and get your players to move in certain ways to create spaces for other players to exploit. And it's purely a cause of a problem of both the players and the coaches in Australia, that neither all have gotten to a high enough level at that younger age where the coaches can recognize that they need to adapt and be better and to open up spaces, and like they do in Europe. And the players haven't got that either, because on the weekend they're not playing against the same quality as they would be in Spain, right? As I always say, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, how small, tall, big you are, how good you are technically. None of that matters. If I pick a person up and put them in Spain, and then or it doesn't matter, I'm just using Spain as an example, but if I pick a random player up off the street, put him in Spain, and then I say myself in Australia, I can almost guarantee you, if we're doing this amount of training, he's going to be better than me.
Hmm.
And that's just something that people don't really understand in Australia as such, is that it doesn't really matter, how many, you can put in all the hours you want, but if you're not in a good environment, or if you're not in an environment that's going to challenge you, then it's almost wasted time. It's not wasted time, but it almost is, because if you're comparing yourself to the players overseas, it's a tricky one, right? Because they're
Hmm.
getting ridiculous training against ridiculous players and great coaches every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. And I can almost relate to where me and Mac are from here doing the podcast in America. We have a very similar problem in that the quality of football from the players and coaches, it's no one's fault individually, but the quality of football overall is a little bit lower. So that the overall development of players is a little bit lower. And I know when I was younger, I always wanted to sort of go overseas to develop myself better in a European country, because I felt like that would be the best pathway for me to get better. Now, that didn't work out, and I don't regret any decisions that I made, but I do know that you ended up going to Europe and spending some of your youth career in Europe. I know you said Spain a lot, and I know you played in Spain. You also played in Germany in both the youth systems of La Liga and Bundesliga. Do you feel like this, what you sort of said, is a problem? And I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing. It's sort of where football is in Australia and the United States. Do you think this problem is sort of the reason that you wanted to move and that drove you to move to different academies overseas?
100%. And look, the reason I say it's no one's fault, because people might listen to this and go, well, if it's no one's fault, how do we fix it, right? Um, that how do we fix it question is a whole other question I could go on for hours for, right? But I just want to touch on this. And it's like, you can have, and where I played in Queensland was a club called Brisbane City for a period of time. And I won't say the guy's name, but he was a really good coach, right? Very good coach, helped me a lot, moved me around across the field and put me into some good positions to learn. And he was a great coach, right? For that young age that I was there. And I'm using him as an example because he's a really good coach. But the issue is, and his teams play very well, right? They generally win the league and play very well. The issue there is, right, his players are limited and capped on how far they can develop, not because of how great of a coach he is, but because of the players they're playing with and against on the weekend, right? If you're a great team but under a great coach, but in an average league, or in the highest league in Australia, which compared to Europe is kind of still average, then it's still going to be hard, right? So I reached the top where I could in Australia. I was playing up years in like the state team and everything. So I needed to the only way I could continue to develop further, and really just take my game to the next level was to go overseas. And so, yeah, that's what I did. I went to Spain at 11. I went there at 10 first, trialed with Espanyol, who's kind of, one of the biggest clubs in the Catalonia, Barcelona area. And trialed with them at about 10 years old. Got told that I was too small, couldn't speak the language, and I couldn't defend. But that technically and passing, shooting, awareness, etc., was probably better than what they had. But what you need to be at 10 years old to get into a pro academy in Spain, I'm just going to use Spain as an example because I was there, is you need to be a complete player. And people tell me all the time, oh, you can't be complete by 10. Well, if you want to be at the highest level, you have to be to some degree, right? But at the same time, if you're born outside of, the top European football countries, then the reality is you're not going to be a complete player by 10 or 12 or 15 if you don't go there, right? But that's just normal. It's not against anyone. It was the same for me when I went there. I got told you're not complete, you can't defend, you don't know where to run on the field. You've scored 3 goals in our trial game and you won us the game, but yeah, you can't defend, you don't know where to run. I can't play you. I can't put you on the field. If you were going to sign with us, you would play the last 10, 15 minutes of the game where we needed goals because you don't know where to run on the field. That wasn't my fault. It was just where I grew up, the style of play, they're just so much further ahead. So I played in Spain for that period. I trialed at 10, went back, came back to Australia, worked on my defensive side a bit, worked a little bit more on strength, even though I didn't really need to, but I just thought it would be a good idea. And by strength, not weightlifting, just more just tussle in some private sessions and just getting into it a bit harder. Worked on my sharpness, a little bit more of agility, just all the things that I could actually control, because that's the biggest thing. This is probably the number one most commonly asked question is like, what's the number one tip or number one hack or number one thing I can do, to be at the highest levels? That's the question I get asked pretty much every day by 20 people, right? There's not really one thing, but if I was going to tell you one thing, it would just be to everything you can control personally, like forget about your team, forget about your team environment. If you want to be a good player, then you need to focus on everything you can control in yourself and get that to the highest level possible, like agility, sharpness, touch, vision, awareness, balance, core strength, glute strength, all of those things that are going to make you effective when you learn the other side of the game. And I'm glad I get a chance to say that now